Hi divers, it's Ben again. I'm instructor for a number of GUE programs, and in this video I go through all the additional scuba diving gear you're going to use in your GUE Fundamentals class. This series is about how to be best prepared for the GUE Fundamentals class, so consider subscribing and don't miss any upcoming videos. Coming up, guys. In this series, we already talked about the important pieces of gear like the dry suit, BC, regulators, tanks, and so on. If you haven't checked out the videos about all these, make sure to watch the entire playlist. This playlist is a series that aims to help you being better prepared for the GUE Fundamentals class, either with me or any other GUE instructor. Leave me a comment below if you found this whole series helpful so far, and feel free to suggest other topics you want me to cover. Anyway, today I'd like to go with you over all the small things you should bring to the class. Obviously, you're gonna need a mask, as you need it for any other dive too. According to the GUE standards, it should be low volume. The most important thing is that the mask fits properly. You can easily check if it's tight if you put it onto your face, just like this, and breathe in through your nose, literally sucking the mask towards your face, and then hold your breath, just like this. If you feel air entering the mask, it won't be watertight most likely, and you should try another model. However, sometimes this can happen if you have a beard that interferes with the sealing of the mask. So gentlemen, make sure you're shaved, especially under your nose. The color of the silicone or the mask body is just up to your personal taste. Many people, like me, like the timeless black models. If you like to pop out underwater a bit more, try something noticeable like pink. This will make your instructor's life in the class much easier, since it makes students more pop out, making giving feedback to the right student easier. Trust me, your instructor's gonna love this. For people who wear glasses like me, you should make sure you can have corrected glasses in your mask. I personally use the Atomic Aquatics Subframe for years because it has a metal frame inside that makes this mask exceptionally rugged, and you can have corrected glasses in standard values between -8 to +2.5 diopters in 0.5 diopter steps without breaking the bank. I know there are different other brands offering the same, like Technisub I guess, but I personally stick to my Subframe mask. Maybe you don't believe me, but I used to have long hair in the past, so I'm really familiar with diving long-haired. In that regards, I can really recommend a neoprene mask strap, or at least a neoprene cover for the rubber or silicone strap like these. These things make it less painful to wear the mask with long hair. However, I recommend a fixed Velcro strap like this anyway. These straps don't break easily like the rubber or silicone ones, and you always have the same length, making it comfortable to wear. In addition to your primary mask, you need to have a backup mask of equal quality for the class. Make sure the strap is appropriately adjusted on the backup mask so you can easily switch the masks. It happens very often that people try to put on their backup mask and recognize the strap is too tight. That's the reason why I have an adjustable rubber strap on my backup mask, which makes it easier for me to pass it to students and adjust it underwater if needed. If you like to watch how to perform the backup mask switch, check out my video that's linked up here. I put links to in my opinion, suitable masks in the description below, so check it out. The next item you need are apparently the fins. There are a lot of different types in the market, and the manufacturers seem to want to outdo each other with more and more crazy models. I know there's a lot of trolling going around in certain Facebook groups about split fins, and it seems to be a religious question whether to use split fins or not. For the GUE Fundamentals class, please do not bring split fins. It's not impossible to perform the maneuvering techniques we train in the class, but it's much harder. Split fins might be a good idea for long distance swimming. For precise maneuvering or powerful frog kicks, they are not the best choice. Since most people are a bit too head heavy anyway, it makes perfect sense to dive heavy fins. So my personal recommendation, and I think every GUE instructor and former fundamental student will support my statement, and it's also written in the GUE standards, would be to dive non-split rigid rubber fins like the SCUBA Pro JetFin, Poseidon Pro Fin, Apeks RK3, and so on. A ripped fin strap is as annoying as a ripped mask strap, hence I totally recommend using stainless steel spring straps. You will find some links in the description. According to the GUE standards, you need a cutting device. This can be a small knife or something like an easy cut. On my own gear, I use both a knife and an easy cut. The cutting device is fixed to the waist belt of your harness. If you opt for a knife, it can be small since you do not go hunting, and I recommend to have one with a blunt tip. Otherwise, it's really easy to puncture the dry suit if you try to put it back after use. The next small thing you need are wet notes and pencils. Wet notes consist of plastic pages, like these, that make it possible to write underwater. During the class, you're most likely going to note down important stuff into your wet notes, like the GUE MDL table, so if you don't have one, get one. The pencils can be just ordinary pencils. However, I'd recommend to choose plastic pencils over wooden pencils, since the wooden ones don't really like to get wet very often and will start to rot soon. For the fundamentals class, you need to have something that gives you a directional cue, like a compass, and something that gives you information about depth and time. The compass can be just a standard dive compass like this, having a direct read window, a dial on top, a label line to read your direction of travel, and a luminescent compass rose that shows the cardinal directions and has markings for every 5 degrees, for instance. The compass should be wrist mounted with bungee cord so that you can take it off easily if needed. It goes to your left wrist. To get information about dive depth and time, most people use dive computers. The dive computer is mounted with bungee cord 2 on the right wrist. The reason for this is that during ascents you need information about your depth and control the amount of gas in your BC simultaneously. To operate the inflator of your BC, you need your left hand. Wearing the computer on the left wrist would make it impossible, or at least hard, to read the depth while dumping gas from the BC. It is not necessary to have a dive computer for the GUE Fundamentals class. A simple bottom timer is just sufficient. During the class, we talk a lot about decompression and how to be independent from a decompression computer. Although decompression computers have improved largely over the past years, I consider them still as a nice-to-have tool and not mandatory in any way. It's very likely that your instructor asks you to set your high-end decompression computer into bottom timer mode anyway, at least for the class, to develop a mindset towards the dive computer that makes you independent from that machine. Following a dive computer blindly is potentially dangerous and irresponsible. So before you spend a small fortune on a high-end dive computer, you can spend your money on way more important things like a gas analyzer, for instance. I guess the number one cause of fatalities in at least technical diving is the use of the wrong gas. This can be easily prevented by always, and I cannot emphasize this enough, by always analyzing your gas and marking your cylinders, even if you just filled air or are 100% sure that you know what's in your tanks. You can only be sure after a proper analysis of the breathing mix. I know no one that ever died from analyzing too much, but I know people in fact that died from skipping the gas analysis. Therefore, you need a gas analyzer. Most likely, someone in the class, at least the instructor, is going to bring a gas analyzer anyway. However, it's no harm to own one. There are different models in the market. The most simple model is the GUE 100. It can just analyze the oxygen content, which is still the most important thing. You can buy one of these for a fraction of the cost of a standard dive computer, something between 100 and 150 bucks. Link below. If you plan to go into trimix diving, it makes sense to invest a bit more and buy an analyzer that can measure the helium content. I personally use this one, the latest DiveSoft model, and I'm very satisfied with it. But there are a lot of other recommendable models available, link below. You need a surface marker buoy or SMB for the class. There are many different models in the market. According to the GUE standards, the SMB should be appropriate for the environmental conditions. If you do the class in a freshwater lake in Germany, it's not necessary to have a very large SMB. If you do it in the ocean with heavy swell or strong currents, you might need a really large one. Please contact your instructor beforehand and check which model you're gonna need for the class. From my personal experience, for 99% of the GUE fundamentals classes, a smaller one like the 1 meter 3.3 foot version is just fine. I always recommend closed SMBs for a number of reasons. In comparison to open or semi-closed SMBs, the closed ones have an overpressure valve and an inlet mouthpiece, as you can see here, or whatever you call this thing. I don't even know the German term for it. Anyway, in comparison to the semi-closed and open ones, closed ones are more expensive, but are much more reliable. I don't want to go too deep into the differences. We talk about that in the class anyway, but I warmly recommend getting a closed one. I personally own a Halcyon one that comes at around 120 bucks, but there are less expensive ones in the market. I once got this one for $18 from a Chinese vendor. If you'd like to know how the cheap one performs against the expensive Halcyon one and if it's worth buying, check out my cheap versus expensive series, where I tested the cheap SMB against the expensive one. Along with the SMB, you need a spool with at least 30 meters of line. Don't use a reel, since the line can wrap around the axis and might block it up. Expensive, high-quality spools are made from Delrin. Delrin is a durable material with a density slightly above the density of water. That makes it slightly negatively buoyant underwater. If the spool is made from aluminum or steel, it's really heavy and will sink pretty fast if you drop it. Cheap spools are made from a cheaper plastic which is less durable. So I recommend a high quality spool made from Delrin. As usual, you find links to appropriate SMBs and spools in the description. If you aim for the recreational certification in your GUE fundamentals class, you can stick to the GUE base configuration, meaning that you don't need any lights. If you aim for the technical certification, you need to have 1 primary and 2 backup lights. However, I recommend to have a primary and 2 backup lights in any case, just to learn the handling of these devices. The backup lights should have a minimal amount of protrusions and a single bolt snap attached to the rear end to clip them to the left and the right D-ring of your harness and stow them away with the rubber bands on the harness. If you would like to know how to attach the bolt snaps, check out my video How to Tie a Bolt Snap. The backup lights should be as simple as possible. No sophisticated electronic controls, buttons to push. We just want them as fail-safe as possible. Make sure they are powered by ordinary alkaline batteries and are turned on and off by just turning the head thrust like this. The best backup light on the market is, in my opinion, this one, the one from Heser. Heser is a German company who manufactures these lights, and they're really perfectly made. Still, there are many other brands in the market making good backup lights. As a primary light, I recommend having a canister light. By standards, a canister light is only necessary when burn time requirements create the need for an external battery pack. And handheld primary lights are becoming better and better with advancements in battery technology. Still, by now, I'd always recommend a corded light with a battery canister fixed to the right side of your belt using a weight belt buckle. No matter if you use a handheld or a canister light, you need to have a good manhandle installed on the light head to wear it on your left hand. The reason is that in case of an out-of-gas situation, the primary regulator is passed to the out-of-gas diver with the right hand. Wearing the light on the right hand would just blind the stress diver in case of an out-of-gas situation. A good manhandle makes it possible to keep the hand operational while carrying the light head. This is important, especially in dark environments like a cave. You can use a spool or a reel and light the way in front of you at the same time. Make sure the good manhandle sits tightly on the back of the hand and does not slip off your hand easily. When you prepare your lights for the GUE Fundamentals class, make sure you have a bolt snap fixed to the right side of the good manhandle and a short piece of bungee cord on the back. The bolt snap here is to stow away the light permanently if it's turned off. The bungee cord on the back is used to clip the light head temporarily using a double ender and your right D-ring. For instance, if you set an SMB. Speaking of double enders, make sure to bring some to the class. Check out my cheap versus expensive series where I compare a cheap double ender I bought from China to an expensive double ender from a local dive store. Alongside with the double enders, bring some more spare material like O-rings, mask straps, a spare SPG, spare seals for the dry suit and so on. It's just annoying to skip a training dive because of a lost O-ring or a ripped wrist seal. Bringing some simple tools to fix your gear if necessary is a good idea too. If you haven't already, get a small toolbox ready and just have it in your equipment bag. One day you'll be happy to have it. If you have any more questions regarding the additional equipment for a GUE Fundamentals class, don't hesitate to leave a comment. I'm happy to answer your questions. This is a whole series about how to be best prepared for the GUE Fundamentals class. If you took some value out of this video, consider subscribing and ring the bell, and watch the other videos on my channel. See you there.